What's up everybody, welcome to FoundFlix. On this Inning Explained, we'll be looking at the return of the ancient Babylonian demon Bagul in Sinister 2, where a new family becomes his next victims, a young mother on the run from her abusive husband and her two boys. And it's not long after that the kids are subjected to disturbing images of families being slaughtered, all part of Bagul's plan to recruit innocent children to kill their families. The first Sinister film is a modern classic of the genre for a number of reasons, but to me it's especially due to the mystery format the story utilizes. However, since we already know what the deal is after the first film, they can't really go that same route again. I do appreciate how in the sequel the writers, who did write the original, take the story into a quite different direction, focusing more on the kids who are Bagul's victims, and how he claims them. They did at least try to do something new, but the problem is, even if different, that doesn't mean it's good, which is unfortunately the case here. And there's naturally a whole new batch of murder films on display, and this aspect still works for the most part, but it's just the ghost kids forcing Dylan to watch them, not really intertwined into the story like the first film. So it just starts to feel like a kind of slog after a while. Even Dylan is like, no, I don't want to watch any more murders, dang it. And this is how the audience, or me at least, started to feel about it after a while. It's certainly a huge step down in quality in almost every aspect from the first film. I mean, going from our lead being Ethan Hawke to the minor character Deputy So-and-so taking the limelight in his place. And it's jarring to say the least, because he's still a goofball like before, but with him front and center, it makes the tone of the movie all over the place, versus the nearly relentless tension of the first entry. Though we do get new information on Bagul and his complicated rituals, enlightening us into more on how the character works and expanding his powers in some interesting ways. So let's check out Sinister 2, breaking down the story, how Bagul takes his children, and explaining the cliffhanger ending. We begin, as expected, with a brutal slaying of a family in a home movie style format. Three people on crosses in a cornfield, bags over their heads. The one filming tossing down a lighter, creating a trail of fire engulfing all three. But it was only a dream, or perhaps a premonition for young Dylan, startled awake in bed, turning when hearing the clothes creakily moving in his closet, followed by Bagul's face revealed in the darkness. He hides under the covers, only for a crack-skinned other boy to rise up, scaring him out of bed. Here we are seeing our next targets of the ancient Babylonian deity, the twins Dylan and Zach. And there's only one bumbling, awkward man that can save the day, our old pal Deputy So-and-so. Here, even though he has graduated from supporting role to lead protagonist, he is still never given a proper name, which I guess is kind of a running gag for the series, but it's annoying to keep having to call him so-and-so over and over. So I'm just gonna call him Drew going forward. He looks like a Drew to me, come on, right? And after that actually pretty frightening intro sequence, the tone goes somewhere else entirely thanks to Drew, him bumbling like a buffoon as usual.
No, I've never had any sacraments that I can think of, not that I can remember. I mean, I may have had.
Way to keep the scary tone you just established in the first scene. Way to go, guys. Jeez. He laments over what happened to the Oswald family in the first film, knowing it's going to happen again. It's just a question of when and where. And we already know our new doomed family, single mom Courtney and her twins, seeing them running around a grocery store like animals. And when their mom breaks them up, it sounds like they stole the toy guns. Ugh, these kids are kind of annoying me already. Given more ammo to hate them when Courtney sends them in search of cereal, and they come back with 4 boxes, complaining when she tells them to put some back. Okay, I officially hate these kids. Bagul, you can have them, take them already. I'm tired of them. Turns out Courtney is on the run from her abusive ex-husband, and he has apparently sent spies in search of her. A creepy guy at the store trying to grab one of the kids, sending them all fleeing in terror. As they drive away, the man calling someone, confirming that it's her. Looks like daddy will be coming home before too long. They've been laying low at a family member's country home with nearby abandoned church, and one-time site of ritualistic slayings thanks to Bagul. And Drew is already on the case, digging into the Jacobs house, which seems to have been vacant since the incident, and sets into action, on the way out learning what his plan is. A news article detailing the Oswald house has been burned down with suspicion of it being arson, this being thanks to Drew. As Ellison considered before, could you close the doorway if you burn the media? But Drew figured out a different way to ensure no more deaths, burning down the house instead. thusly stopping the chain of killings in their tracks. It's a good thing he's heading there too, as Bagul is already making his presence known to Dylan. Telling Mom that dinner is ready, whose studio is in the church, blood begins to pool in formation on the ground. She assures him it's just a building, but he isn't so confident, muttering, "I know," before scurrying away. She expresses concern to Zach about his brother, feeling that he's different out here and gonna need his brother's support to get through these tough times. Ah, brotherly love. Hopefully nothing comes between them and turns them into adversaries. We soon witness just what is making Dylan act so strange. In bed, a sharply dressed ghost kid and former Bagul victim Milo, informing Dylan that he has something to show him. He's not so sure, worried about his mom, but Milo assures him she'll be busy working and asking if he trusts him. "I certainly do, ghost boy. I'm sure you have no nefarious intent here whatsoever." But of course he does, escorting him to the basement, where there's a familiar looking box waiting for him. Inside are a projector and even some records, which are bizarrely used as a live soundtrack accompaniment to the snuff films. Don't think they really needed to include this element. It's like, oh, the home movies wouldn't have a soundtrack? How is that realistic? But like, it's just a soundtrack. It doesn't have to actually be playing for it to make sense in a movie, you know? They normally have, it's not like most of the time in a movie when there's music playing that it's like, oh, it's coming from the stereo, it's fucking magic, it's a soundtrack, don't worry about it. Sticking a record on a giant phonograph, another kid emerges, here with his own film reel to show Dylan, entitled Fishing Trip. Well, I'm sure nothing out of the ordinary will happen on this fishing trip, sounds like a good old time. However, this time instead of 8mm, the filmmakers upgraded to 16mm for these sequences. Looks like Bagul's upped his production budget. We watch a family on a fishing trip, no surprise there, spotting some of that yummy green Bagul liquid that is used by the children killers to drug their victims before murdering them. The family is hung upside down from a bridge, and a shoddy CG alligator crests the water, chomping on the family members and gobbling them to death. Gotta say, definitely a mistake to use CG in these snuff films, as it completely ruins the faux reality of them, but oh well. Dylan averts his eyes at the violence, the others turning his head back and demanding he watch it, but he's like, "No way, ghost pals, I'm out of here." The others shushing him as he runs back to bed. We will come to understand what we're seeing is the kids trying to turn Dylan, just as they were turned evil. It's by forcing the kid to watch the films that causes this, subjecting them to more and more of the death, eventually becoming so desensitized to the violence that they turn on their own family. Ashley must have gone through the same experience, though we didn't actually see this process occurring beyond the previous taken girl Stephanie making an appearance in her bedroom. Now we are seeing the beginning stage in full how this process plays out. The next day, Drew shows up ready to burn the place to the ground, surprised to see the family living there. He is greeted aggressively by Courtney, misunderstanding that he's a PI working for her ex, which is cleared up over a cup of joe, leading Drew to why he's here, asking if she's heard of Ellison and what happened to him. She realizes that he's here because of the murders at the church, and he confirms he believes them to be related due to a number of similarities. Though in showing her the Bagul symbol, she admits to not seeing anything strange like that around whatsoever. Rather than investigate for himself, Drew leaves for some reason, saying it's too late tonight and he'll be back tomorrow. Guess they need to pad the runtime already or something, I'm not sure. But I would figure this kind of thing would be, you know, dealt with immediately. Sorry, it's after 7 p.m, I'm off the clock. If your kids get eaten, that's on you, lady. Drew has his own encounter with the boogeyman, who has once again spread his presence to new pastures, taking control of a laptop, glitching over to stories detailing the church murders, focusing on pictures of Milo, the Bagul symbol appearing on the screen, and the computer crashes. I hate Bagul viruses. Those are the worst. As Drew busies himself with something, what are you doing over there, buddy? Takes about 5 seconds to replug something in. Bagul manifests in the screen's reflection, and he disappears. Back with the family, Bagul's kids are hard at work. Milo trying to convince a testy Dylan to watch more films. He refuses, saying he's having trouble sleeping already due to what he's seen. A quick flash of the opening sequence glimpse with Dylan wielding a sharp blade right out of Children of the Corn. He comes to in a daze of sorts, stumbling down into the basement in a dreamlike state. Another girl appears with a solution to Dylan's nightmares, promising him that all he has to do is watch all the films and he'll never have bad dreams again. Damn, these kids are tricky. And he agrees to watch her reel Christmas Day, which is sure to be a heartwarming affair. We watch her and her family experiencing a joyous Christmas right out of any classic schmaltzy flick. Upended when the family is seen outside, bound in strings of Christmas lights, buried in the snow in their own makeshift snow graves. The family unable to escape and beginning to freeze to death in the cold earth as the film ends. This is probably the best snuff film in this one, which is funny because it was actually shot for the first movie and ultimately cut, Feels like that says something. Milo is stoked to watch another, but Dylan's not feeling it, even when again promised it will cure his bad dreams. Though they don't intend to leave him alone until he does what they want. All of them just hanging out watching him outside. Like, hey, sup, wanna watch a movie? Joined by his brother, showing his first signs of jealousy here, calling Dylan nothing special because he can see the kids too. A reflection of Bagul appearing as he closes the door. So both kids can see the ghosts, and assumedly both could be driven to evil. And it appears that the children and Bagul are choosing who might work better for their means. Drew returns for his investigation of the church, comparing the location now to the crime scene photos, focusing on an urn or jar of sorts that rattles on the ground. Then moving more aggressively, knocking it over, he finds the wily creature responsible, a rat. Yet another form of the shape-shifting Bagul, just as we saw with Ellison in the attic in the first film. Hearing creaking behind him, he spins around, seeing the outline of a boy in the shadows, dropping his flashlight and seeing nothing there. Then Mr. Boogie himself appears, sending Drew tumbling back, crashing through a wall, discovering a Bagul symbol, making it more than clear that this was the site of a previous ritual. Even though we already knew that. Drew didn't though. He's sidetracked by a call from a professor, a colleague of Professor Jonas from the first film, who informs him that Jonas has gone missing and needs to see him as soon as possible, as Jonas left something behind he has to see, saying it could be the key to this whole thing. When pressing him further for what he's found, he's unwilling to divulge, worried about the safety of saying anything over the phone. Now, I don't think Bagul is bugging their phone calls or anything, but he could be, I guess. I don't know. He's been expanding his powers a lot. It could be tapping all kinds of phone calls. Your security on the phone isn't safe. Dylan, sitting on the porch, is joined by a spider, and apparently, since he's Dennis the Menace, reaches for a slingshot to destroy the arachnid. But he finds himself unable to follow through, and perhaps is showing he doesn't have that bloodlust required to join Bagul's other children. Drew joins him, casually stepping into his role as new surrogate father, offering support to the boy, admitting to having nightmares himself. And that's why he devotes himself when awake to helping anyone he can. Their developing new bond is interrupted by the return of Courtney's ex, Clint, the over-the-top embodiment of the biggest douche ever. He's a really horrible character that is so horrible and terrible to everyone that it becomes actually laughable. It's like we have to have someone to root against. Let's create the most cartoonish asshole ever. He's here to take the boys away from Courtney. With a police escort in tow and everything, Dylan's so terrified when seeing him he pees his pants. Geez, seems like a real winner. He's about to get away with it too until Drew intervenes. As a former officer knowing the intricacies of the law and knowing that what they're doing is illegal, and mentions his involvement as a suspect in the burning of the Oswald house, which received worldwide media coverage. So if he were to be arrested now, it could look bad for them and draw the press once again. The cops then are forced to back down as he essentially called their bluff. Clint doesn't let this roadblock discourage him, issuing a final threat that he'll be back and calling Courtney a whore before driving off in his big stupid truck. Yeah, you can see why these high school sweethearts got hitched. What a charmer. This incident makes Courtney want to leave, but Drew discourages her, saying it would make her look like a flight risk to the court, though the real reason being if she leaves the site of the previous murders, this will complete their own ritual and seal their demises. Fortunately, Courtney buys it as she's already smitten by Drew, since he's not a complete lunatic and everything, inviting him to stay for dinner. And he steps right into his newfound role as the family's patriarch, which is kind of a weird direction to take the story in, but okay. He even stays the night, but can't sleep, looking back over crime scene photos and spotting Mr. Boogie in the background of an image, coming to life and lunging at him. The commotion wakes up Courtney, the two going outside to have a couple drinks. Sure, why not? Let's start a romantic rendezvous when there's a suit-wearing demon guy lurking about and my children are in danger. Not to mention those pesky kids, again bugging Dylan to watch more death, and he gives in. Another kid appearing in the basement with his recording. This one's mine, he explains with a demented glee, entitled Kitchen Remodel. And good thing, the kids don't forget to put on the spooky sounds record every time. This thing does not work otherwise. In the film, a family is taking a break during a kitchen remodel, the room in disarray, as the killer boy joins them at the table, cutting to the sink later overflowing, the boy donning galoshes, his family tied up and attached with electrical wire. The kid takes a live wire, tossing it into the water, electrocuting his family, and Dylan is starting to look a little more into it than before, but still pulls himself himself away. He's spotted running away by his brother, who again finds himself jealous of his twin, going down and asking Milo directly why the weaker Dylan was chosen over him. And Milo is a big old jerk, insulting him as inferior to his brother and not good enough or smart enough for their needs. And upset Zach responding he is smarter and gooder too. I'll show you who is good enough to kill their family, you buttheads. The next morning, Drew heads out to the professor, stopped by Courtney with a thermos of Joe for him. Ah, they're falling in love. How lovely. Maybe that Bagul is actually a matchmaking deity because the sparks are flying. He finds the professor in a frantic and heavily drunken state, the evidence left behind by Jonas, showing us that the influence of Bagul has spread further than we could have previously ever considered. He tells Drew of the Norwegian hell call, an urban legend for many years, dating all the way back to the 1970s, where ham radio enthusiasts came across a strange transmission that of a weird, childlike piano tinkling. For years it would come and go, until in the late 1990s it was actually caught on tape, and the professor has his own copy. They hear a child's voice counting over the weird piano sounds, along with screaming, as though hearing someone being murdered in the broadcast. The numbers, it turns out, are coordinates that match with a house in the middle of Norway, where a family was murdered in 73, the date of the original transmission. And unsurprisingly, in the aftermath of the murders, there was one child missing, the actual killer kid who was broadcasting the coordinates. Thusly, Bagul can inhabit any kind of recording or iconography, literature, music, images. Anything can act as a doorway for the deity, well beyond his seemingly favored form of 8mm film. And what Jonas had found before disappearing was a separate pattern in Norway, just like the US one that Drew discovered previously. And the ham radio the professor has is the same one from at the house. And the cursed radio springs to life, playing back what the two were saying only seconds earlier. And Drew, extra spooked, demands he destroy the radio sooner rather than later. At the house, Zach's jealousy comes to a head, demanding he say he is better than him, all spurned on by Milo's comments, who along with the others are watching the beating, almost as though this is what their plan was this whole time, to lure out this dormant, inherent violent side to Zach, clearly on display here. Having another nightmare of him murdering his family, Dylan still trudges downstairs, the kids as usual trying to get him to watch more, threatening he has to watch the rest tonight or Bagul will be mad. And this time we get to see Milo's murders at the church, dubbed Sunday service. It begins with parishioners in a nice normal session, Milo amongst the group, holding a cup to offer for communion, no doubt full of sweet sleepy boogie juice, as we cut to the group splayed out later on the floor, staked to the ground with those jar things on top of them, as Milo enacts a classic medieval form of torture. Rats are unleashed, getting under the jars. Milo tops them with hot coals, forcing the rats to burrow into the parishioner's body to avoid the heat, tearing them apart and ripping through their bodies to get free. Dylan is disgusted, still not having a stomach for the violence, as another girl appears with her reel. One more for you, just one more. Don't mess with me, there's always gonna be more, ya monsters. The kids turn all veiny-faced, and Dylan flees to the church. Good choice for places to find safety, the source and reason for all the evil in the area. And Boogie is even waiting for the boy there, stalking him down the hallway, where he then hides in a back room until he passes. The increasingly annoying ghost kids are there though, wanting him to watch another one of their stupid movies or whatever, and Dylan finally stands up for himself, saying he's not gonna watch any more movies and he doesn't want to end up like these dang ghost kids already. I hate you ghost kids. That's okay, Milo says, as it turns out none of this was meant for you, but for your brother. Their actions pushing him to want to watch the films due to his brotherly qualms over being not good enough. Dylan finds his brother already engrossed in the death, and when trying to pull him away, shows his darker nature already bubbling to the surface, bitch slapping his brother and ordering him to bed. I guess this was intended to be the movie's big twist, that they were actually after Zach and not Dylan, but it was pretty obvious for a while where things were going there. Even worse, guess who's back? Mr. Clint, who has somehow performed an emergency court session without Courtney that gives him custody, which makes so little sense it's baffling, giving her a lose-lose ultimatum. Either he takes the kids and she goes bankrupt in court trying to get them back, or she comes home with him and at least gets to be with her children. Again, this guy, just terrible. Choosing to go back home with him, they are pretty much dooming the ritual to reach completion, as moving from the location of a previous murder leads to a new one. The newly reunited family share a totally normal dinner together, including Clint checking through Courtney's phone and telling Drew to never contact her again, and stuffing mashed mashed potatoes into Dylan's mouth. So yeah, normal healthy family stuff going on here. A frantic Drew shows up trying to warn them that they're in danger, greeted by Clint with a shotgun telling him to buzz off and beating the absolute hell out of him. Thanks, Clint. Always the best. The next morning, it's time for the family's big day. Zach going to retrieve a camera and tripod. Bagul demands steady shots. From a distance, he films Dylan being taught a golf swing by his dad, then places the camera down, joining the others. Retrieving his mom a cool glass of boogie juice. A woozy Dylan texting Drew to come and help them. And Zach sets up his murder scenario, matching that scene in Dylan's previous visions where he was the killer, turning out to be his brother instead, wielding the children of the corn blade and same flannel shirt. He takes a lighter, tossing it, and Clint is the first to go. Good riddance as far as I'm concerned. I'd say being burned alive is a pretty fitting end for this ridiculous asshole. Drew arrives just in time to hear Courtney screaming from the nearby fields. And now it's Dylan's turn to be set ablaze. Drew plowing through the field just in time to save him, crashing right into Zach. He sets out untying them as Zach gets to his feet, Milo reminding him to grab the camera, chasing his family into the cornfields. He slashes at Drew, getting some of his fingers, but they make it back to the house. Zach's still close on their trail. The other kids assist him in tracking his family down, the Christmas girl alerting him to their location, them seeing the shower curtain opening and closing on its own, only Dylan seeing who it is that is physically doing it. They go hog wild in the next room, tossing books and papers all around the room, looking like quite a spectacle, and pushing in a desk at Drew. Zach hones in on his family, just about to get them, until the ex-deputy knocks the camera out of his hand with a golf club, smashing it to pieces on impact, and no longer working. Looks like Bagul and Zachy won't be able to finish their little movie this time. The kids scold him for failing, and Bagul is tired of his shit, placing a hand on his shoulder, and the boy dissolves into a skeleton, then appearing in his realm on the screen. The projector catches on fire, quickly spreading throughout the house, the surviving trio making it outside and back to the motel, thinking that by disrupting the ritual, they have escaped their fates, but not so fast. Drew goes into his room to collect his belongings, finding the cursed ham radio there waiting for him on the desk, which blares to the Norwegian hell broadcast, and Bagul appears, giving him a final peekaboo before presumably killing him, even though we haven't seen Bagul actually kill anyone other than Zach just a second ago. So this is more just like a cliffhanger than really sealing Drew's fate as far as I'm concerned. It's really like they just got to page 90 and were like, ugh, we're done here, let's wrap this bitch up. There's so much left hanging, and I'm sure the intent was to continue the story in a Sinister 3, but this one didn't do well enough to warrant another sequel. When recently asked, Jason Blum definitely said there will not be another sequel, but is open to a potential TV series to continue the misadventures of Bagul. So there is some hope of a return, but probably not anytime soon, or probably ever. Which brings us to the conclusion of this ending explained for Sinister 2. It's certainly not as good as the original, suffering from a been there, done that feel, despite them trying to change up the core story, but it doesn't really work to their advantage in this case. The reality being there probably shouldn't have ever been a sequel made to this one in the first place. The first one stands on its own, and doesn't really even leave you wanting a sequel at all. But you know Hollywood and how they love their money. Maybe they can come up with some new take on the series to really make something unique that doesn't feel like a retread. What did you guys think of Sinister 2 and its ending? What would you hope to see in a potential Sinister 3? Let me know your thoughts in the comments below. Make sure to like, subscribe, and follow. Thanks for watching FoundFlix. See you next time.